All right, let's be real for a second. When we talk about how cannabis tastes, we usually stick to the same old descriptions, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Skunky, earthy,
Yeah,
oh, this one's got a hint of pine, like we're suddenly sommelier.
right.
But seriously, what if I told you we're barely scratching the surface? Like
Yeah.
there's a whole universe of flavor hidden inside those buds.
I'd say you're absolutely right.
So, get ready to ditch the cliches, because in this deep dive, we're exploring the surprisingly complex and delicious world of cannabis tasting notes. And let me tell you, I've got a stack of research here that suggests it's way more than just skunk and pine. It's a whole symphony of senses and science.
It really is. And one of the things that's so cool is how much more is going on than just what hits your tongue. You
Yeah.
know, smell plays a massive role, even more so than with a lot of other things we enjoy.
True. Like we've all had that experience where we have a cold and suddenly food tastes super bland
Exactly.
because we can't actually smell it.
It's all connected.
But how does that work exactly with cannabis?
It all comes down to how our brains are wired. Smell and taste are totally intertwined. They work together to create this incredibly rich sensory experience. And when you add cannabis to the mix, well, there's this thing called the entourage effect, and it changes everything.
Okay, the entourage effect, it sounds kind of important.
It is.
Break it down for me.
All right, imagine this. You've got a delicious strawberry, right? Sweet, a little tart, perfect on its own. But what if you blend that strawberry into a smoothie and you add some banana for creaminess, maybe a squeeze of lime for pearlizing, a touch of ginger for warmth? Suddenly you've got this flavor explosion, something way beyond just a strawberry.
Okay, I'm with you.
That's the entourage effect in a nutshell.
Yeah.
It's not just about one single element, but how everything interacts to create something entirely new.
I'm getting hungry. But when we're talking about cannabis, what exactly are those ingredients that are coming together to create all these different unique flavors?
Well, you've got a bunch of compounds playing a part. Terpenes, flavonoids, cannabinoids, they all contribute.
Okay.
But let's start with terpenes for a second, because they're kind of like the headliners of the cannabis flavor world.
Oh yeah, I've heard of terpenes. And you know what I think is super cool? All that research I was doing,
Yeah,
terpenes aren't just in cannabis. They're literally everywhere.
that's right, which is what makes it so relatable for people. For instance, you know that earthy, musky aroma you get with some strains? That's morcine. And it's also found in mangoes.
Wait, seriously? That explains so much. I always get those mango vibes from certain strains.
See? It all comes together. And then there's limon, which gives you that really bright, citrusy smell.
Okay, yeah,
That's why some strains have that lemon-lime kick, just like the actual fruit.
gotcha. But what about that super piney aroma? I always thought those strains were just like channeling the forest or something.
Well, you're not wrong. That's pine, found in surprise, pine trees.
Makes sense.
And then there's linalool, which gives you that super relaxing floral scent. It's the same stuff that's in lavender.
Ah.
And
yeah.
last but not least, we've got caryophyllene. That's the one that brings the heat, kind of like black pepper.
It's wild how all these different smells come from these tiny little compounds.
It is pretty amazing.
This whole terpene thing reminds me of this one time. I tried this strain that was supposed to be really high in pine.
Okay.
And I was so ready for that, like, walk in the woods experience, you know?
Yeah, I get it.
But honestly, to me, it smelled exactly like my grandma's cleaning cupboard. Later on, I found out that limon can also have those piney notes.
That's so interesting.
It just goes to show you can't always judge a strain by its supposed terpene profile.
It's true. There's so much complexity.
Yeah, it's not always as simple as one terpene, one flavor.
Exactly. Just like with that smoothie, right? It's the combination of all the elements together that make it special.
It's like those amazing chefs who take all these unexpected ingredients and somehow create something incredible.
I love that analogy.
Speaking of culinary masters, we've talked about terpenes, but what about flavonoids? Are they like the sous chefs in this whole flavor situation?
I like that. Yes, you could definitely say that. Flavonoids are more like the supporting cast. They're there to add those subtle, nuanced layers of flavor. They're actually what gives fruits and flowers their vibrant colors.
Seriously. So you're saying those fruity strains I love aren't just a fluke? There's actual science behind it.
Absolutely. It's not just the terpenes, but those flavonoids adding that extra depth and complexity. They can create those little hints of, say, berry sweetness or a subtle floral undertone.
It's like this whole secret world of flavor we never even knew existed. Okay, so we've got terpenes and flavonoids working their magic, creating this incredible symphony of flavor. But here's the thing. How we experience that symphony depends a lot on how we consume the cannabis, right?
That is a very good point.
It's like having all the same ingredients, but cooking them in completely different ways. You'll end up with a totally different result.
That's a great way to put it.
So let's break it down.
Okay, sure.
First up, we've got smoking, the OG method.
Right.
But how does that high heat impact the flavor?
Well, the thing about smoking is that the high heat can actually destroy some of those delicate terpenes and flavonoids. So you might not experience the full spectrum of flavors.
That makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Plus, you got the paper burning or maybe the water filtration if you're using a bong. All these external factors that can affect the flavor.
Okay, so what about vaping? How does that impact the flavor profile?
Vaping is interesting because it uses a much lower temperature, so you end up retaining a lot more of those delicate terpenes and flavonoids, which generally leads to a cleaner, more true to the strain flavor.
That's really interesting. So vaping might be the way to go if you really want to taste those subtle nuances.
It could be, yeah. But then, of course, there's edibles, which are a whole other story.
Right, because now you're basically baking the cannabis into something else entirely.
Exactly. And that means the cannabis flavor is often masked by the food or drink itself. Plus, the actual cooking process can change the flavor profile too.
It's true. I feel like I've had some edibles where you can definitely taste the cannabis,
Oh, yeah.
and others where it's completely hidden. It's really fascinating, and it comes back to this idea that everyone experiences flavor differently. You know, some people love cilantro, and others think it tastes like soap.
It's true.
It's the same idea with cannabis and terpenes. Our individual sensitivity to those compounds plays a huge role in how we perceive the flavor. What you might experience as fruity, someone else might taste as more floral or even spicy.
I've definitely had that experience.
Yeah.
It can make talking about cannabis strains so tricky.
It's true.
One person's fruity is another person's earthy. It's like with grapefruit. Some people love that tangy bitterness, while others can't stand it.
Exactly.
So, to wrap it all up, it seems like cannabis flavor is way more complex than we often give it credit for. It's a whole world of terpenes, flavonoids, and this amazing entourage effect, all influenced by how we choose to consume it and our own unique palates.
Well said.
Honestly, this deep dive has totally changed how I think about cannabis and flavor. But it also leaves me with this question. If we know that certain terpenes create specific flavors, could we one day engineer cannabis to taste exactly how we want? Like, could we create a strain that tastes just like blueberries or pineapple?
Wow.
Just something to think about.